Coming up in this week's Torah Pearls.
Exodus chapter 38, verse 25 through 28 describes a census that is completed. It's the same one as the one described in Numbers chapter 1. What's going on?
Is the ritual of the spirit of jealousy a divinely implemented induced abortion?
What do silver amulets discovered in Jerusalem in 1979 have to do with the Vulcan spot?
Do the Levites begin their service at age 30, or at age 25, or at age 20?
Hey, what's up with the Levites? Sometimes they're included, sometimes they're not. What gives?
Is being the firstborn of Israel a perpetual danger?
All right, Jono, let's jump into this thing.
Let's go. G'day, dear viewers, and thank you for your company once again here on truth2u.org. That's truth2u.org. I'm Jono Vandor, and joining me all the way from the HOREB Institute in Louisiana is, of course, the author of the Moses Scroll, Ross Nichols. G'day, mate.
Hello, Jono. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing pretty well. This week we are doing Bamidbar and Naso. We're doing two. We've created our own double portion for the week because what? Last week your computer blew up or something?
A double whammy caused by technical issues, I guess. Yeah, we lost the motherboard. Seth ordered everything. We got everything. We should be good to go, and it's all, but, you know, hey, sometimes things happen, but I am glad to be back, and we're ready to roll.
I'm glad to be back, and so we have a lot to cover, and we're going to rip through it. Before we even start, Ross, I just want to say shout out to James Beasley. G'day, James of Tennessee, who generously sent me this poster that you see behind me in the background, and what it is a poster.
I have one of those as well. Yeah.
There you go. 10 Matters of the Covenant. And what he did is he got the 10 words as put in the Moses Scroll and joined them with each blessing and each corresponding blessing and curse, put it in a beautiful poster, and very generously sent it to me. So thank you very much, James. Love it.
Well, look, let me say, since we're saying this, Mary Ann sent me one, and so I have one of those too.
There you go.
How about that? Yeah.
All right. Good stuff. So it is time for Season 3 of Torah Pearls, brought to you by Tanakh Tours. That is Tanakh, T-A-N-A-K-H, TanakhTours.com. We are doing a double portion. We're going to kick off with Bamidbar. We're finally in the Book of Numbers, but Ross, we're not out of the priestly material yet, are we?
No, not yet.
Not
if you
yet.
Thought that we could turn the page or change the Torah tablet with a Torah tablet for Numbers and we would be out of the priestly world, we're just, as they say, out of the frying pan and into the fire. More priestly material.
So we're working on it. We're getting there. We're almost there, but we're still in the priestly material. We are joined, of course, by our AI critical scholar, Ezra. Ezra, give us a rundown, a summary, if you would, of Bamidbar.
Parashat Bamidbar, the opening of the book of Numbers, sets the stage for the wilderness narrative. Text critically, we're mostly dealing with priestly material here. Very structured, very obsessed with order, lineage, and sacred space. This portion covers the census of the tribes, the arrangement of the camp around the tabernacle, and the special status of the Levites. What we're really seeing is the priestly writer's theological agenda, reinforcing Israel as a divinely ordered community with a rigid social and ritual hierarchy. Every tribe has a place, every person a role, and the Levites, well, they're carved out as a priestly buffer between God and the rest of Israel. From an academic angle, this isn't about historical demographics. These numbers are symbolic and idealized. 12 tribes, multiples of 10,000. It's political theology dressed as logistics. The census serves to legitimize the priesthood, centralize power around the sanctuary, and present a vision of Israel as a holy army, not a ragtag group of ex-slaves. So in short, Bamidbar begins not with action, but with structure, offering a priestly ideal of order before the narrative chaos of the wilderness kicks in. It's liturgical scaffolding, setting the boundaries for a community about to be tested.
Liturgical scaffolding, Jono.
And it presents a vision of Israel as a holy army, not a ragtag group of ex-slaves. Got into a bit of trouble last. In the last program, because we talked about slavery, and everyone was upset. Because, well, not everyone. A lot of people understood what I was saying, but some people didn't understand what I was saying and were upset because we talked about slaves, and I mentioned that the Moses Scroll, like the canonical text, does not how do I say this, seems to permit slavery or servitude, because those two words are the same word in the Hebrew.
I'm telling you, it's very emotional. I said when we were talking about it, I knew it would be emotional because in people's mind, particularly Americans, I read one of the comments that I used to like you guys, but you just can't come out and condemn slavery. And in their mind, they're not talking about in the ancient world. They don't know anything. I think they don't understand the connection you were trying to make. So maybe is that what you're going to do here? Is try to explain that a little bit better?
Very briefly, because we will talk about slaves again, because it is going to come up again, probably a number of times for us in the remainder of the Pentateuch. But once again, Eved is the word in Hebrew, and Eved is used something like 800 times or perhaps more in the Old Testament. But the thing is that it's used for a number of different levels of. I suppose you could define Eved as one who submits, right? That submission could be forced labor, or that submission could be selling oneself into servitude for the want of for better security, such as just security, food, clothing, shelter, that sort of thing. And there are other applications too. Like, for example, the son of Ruth and Boaz, they named him Oved, like servant, right? Or slave. It's the same word, is my point. Different levels of application, but it's the same word. And what I presented to people was we don't know exactly what the application is when the Moses Scroll, or when even the Ten Commandments in Exodus and Deuteronomy, what it's referring to when it says your manservant, your maidservant. Are they indentured servants? Are they bond servants? Like, are they people who have submitted themselves into servitude for want of some certain securities? Or are they forced labor of slaves that have been purchased on the market, or are they forced labor of captives of war, that sort of thing? We don't know. What we do know is in the last Torah portion that we did, it said, hey, if you have a Hebrew servant, a Hebrew slave, don't treat them harsh. But if you have a foreign servant, hey, you can treat them harsh. Don't worry about that. Well, we're not endorsing that. We're certainly not. What I am suggesting is that if the Moses Scroll is referring to people who have submitted themselves into servitude because they're down on their luck and they need to repay a debt, or they need to obtain shelter and food from somewhere, then I think that's a good thing that is available to them. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to jump in and say, did you know that Adam was a slave?
In what sense?
Biblically. I mean, if we're going to talk about the word Eved, then the whole purpose for humanity, so this is the distinction I would make to add to what you're trying to clarify here, when God in Genesis chapter 2, where it says that he took the man, verse 15, Vayichach Adonai Elohim et ha'adam, and Elohim took the man, and he rested him in the Garden of Eden to serve it, to work it, and to guard it. So technically and biblically, if you look at the word Eved is a worker. So when we think biblically, it's not always the idea of someone in shackles singing spiritual hymns. That's not the image. It's not always the image.
That's chattel slavery. That's forced slavery. Now, if it's the case of a captive of war, you've captured someone who was trying to kill you. In fact, probably maybe killed your friends or your friend's family or whatever. They owe you a debt, and I have no problem with that sort of forced labor. On the other hand, or prisoners, if prisoners are they owe a debt to society, they should be made to work it off.
So you're just saying that the Bible presents all these different angles on slavery. Yeah.
And historically we know that those different levels of servitude or different levels of slavery existed. It's not just because Elohim liberated Israel from the Egyptians doesn't mean that that servants that Israel owned and they are their property, at least for a time, are also liberated. That doesn't follow. And my point was that if people are allowed to submit themselves into servitude for want of a better life, they should be able to do that, and that is a preferable system, I would say, than welfare. That is my point. And it would be akin, Ross, and we won't go into further detail because we've got two.
We have two Torah portions.
But it would be akin to like here in Australia, we have minimum wage. The idea of minimum wage is messing with the free market. A product is only worth what someone is willing to pay for it. And if minimum wage was to be done away with, then people could work for pittance if that meant that it would afford them even a better life to work for a very small amount of money, and they might be grateful for that. To take that opportunity away from them is to then sort of come into some sort of contract under the table, unbeknownst to the government. There's all, to do away with that and to do away with the welfare system, I think would be very good for people who are down in their luck. And that might be what we're looking at in the Moses Scroll and in the canonical Ten Commandments. We will talk more about this, no doubt, as slavery comes up later on in the Pentateuch.
Again.
Right now, Ross, we find ourselves in Numbers, Bamidbar, and it begins like this. On the first day of the second month, in the second year, following the Exodus from the land of Egypt, the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting, saying, that's quite an introduction in and of itself. Where are we? What's going on?
I tell you, it's interesting. It goes to the naming of the book. In Hebrew, it's Bamidbar, in the wilderness. But they didn't just get to the wilderness. We've been in the wilderness since Exodus chapter 12, verse 37 and following. That's where they leave the land of Egypt, according to the Torah text. But what it really says to me is you start off with Numbers. And in Latin, the book's called Numeri. You have in the Greek, it's arithmoi. Anybody who picks it up is going to see that we begin with a census. But this isn't the only census in the book of Numbers. Can I touch on one thing to kind of pull this together?
Yeah.
If you look at the book of Numbers, you have chapters 1 through 25 deal with the first generation, the generation that leaves the captivity of Egypt. If you look at chapter 26 to 36, that's the second generation. We really get that, we really get that spelled out very clearly, that demarcation, if you will. But the thing about the census is, this is something, and I'm really going to bring this up in the class that I teach on Saturday on these Torah portions. One of the things that I think is interesting is that if you look at the chronology, like you look at the book of Numbers, it's not like the book of Leviticus ends on a certain day and then you begin the book of Numbers. It's a new period of time, and you end the book of Numbers and you begin Deuteronomy. Here's what I want people to see. You have to take the book of Deuteronomy and pull it into the chronology that's laid forth in the book of Numbers, and you do the same with the end of Exodus all the way through. So let me make an example. Look at Exodus chapter 30. Let me just look at this, because I think this makes the point better than I can explain it. If you go to Exodus chapter 30 and look at verse 11, 11 through 16, I think this is right. When you take a census of the Israelites to register them, all of them shall give a ransom. Okay, and it goes through and so forth. And so this is talking about when you do a census. Now, the census that they're talking about, look at chapter 38 of Exodus.
Hold on one second, Ross. Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to emphasize, because we did talk about this in some detail when we were in Ketef, but it's not just a census. It's a census so that you may pay a ransom, that a plague may not come upon them through their being enrolled. There is a sort of almost a threat of death, I think we talked about when this census is being done. And then we get to chapter 38. Go ahead.
Yeah, in 38, here's what it says. If I look at verse 25, then the silver from those of the congregation who were counted, okay, now this is what was described in chapter 30, was 100 talents and 1,775 shekels measured by the sanctuary shekel. A bekah, a head, that is half a shekel, measured by the sanctuary shekel, for everyone who was counted in the census. What census, Jono? Okay, get this. From 20 years old and upward, 603,550 men. So this is describing the census that was spoken of in Exodus 30 that here has taken place, which means, Jono, that the census that we begin seeing in the book of Numbers, chapter 1, because guess what? That same figure, 603,550, is the exact number that we get twice in the book of Numbers for that same deal. So my point is, this census that's done in Exodus 38 equals Numbers chapter 1 and following. So you have to put those side by side, and a lot of people don't see that, don't get that, don't know that.
That is, yeah, so I'm just reading the end of, in chapter 30 here. So the originals shall not pay more or less. It says a half shekel. Everyone has to pay a half shekel. The Lord's offering as expiation for your persons. Your very existence requires expiation. You shall take the expiation money from the Israelites as a sign and assign it to the service of the tent of meeting. It shall serve the Israelites as a reminder before the Lord as expiation for your persons. Your very existence requires expiation. Therefore, we have to have a census. Everyone has to pay this money. Otherwise, you could be in trouble. Yeah.
Yep.
And here we find ourselves. Okay, so verse 2, the census of the whole Israelite community by the clans of its ancestral houses, listing of the names, every male, head by head. Verse 3, you and Aaron shall record them by their groups from age 20 and above. Every Israelite who is able to bear arms associated with you shall be a man from each tribe, each one head of his ancestral household. Now, this is interesting. I was reading yesterday that Milgram makes the point, Ross, that that this list may reflect an authentically ancient tradition, and the reason why he says this is because of the absence of the theophoric suffix Yah or Yahu. So, if you look at the names here, none of them end with Yah or Yahu. We already know that theophoric names or Jehovistic, if I can say. Theophoric names are not found in the Pentateuch, except for maybe with the exception of Joshua. But for that reason, he says, even though this is very late, it may well be that it comes from, that it's based in some truth, which is interesting. And what we're going to see as we go further on, and we've mentioned this already because there have been tribal lists, is that there are two competing tribal lists. In the Moses Scroll, for example, we have a tribal list that includes Manasseh and Ephraim, and it doesn't include Joseph and Levi and the Levites, right? The Levites are treated separately. They're not treated as a tribe in the Moses Scroll. And if that is authentic, then what we're going to see is an attempt to launder those two in, that is Joseph and the Levites, into what Milgram refers to as a authentic and ancient authentic tradition. And we do see that. So we're going to, as we continue through this list, we're going to highlight that. Any thoughts?
No, I tell you, I just looked ahead just because I wanted to make sure that I gave people the references about the 603,550. So this is, I want people to understand that the census done in Exodus 38 is this census from Numbers. Look at Numbers chapter 1, or just put these in your notes. In chapter 1, verse 46, it says 600, even all that they that were numbered were 600,000, 3,550, and then the same figure is given in chapter 2 and verse 32. So anyway, same one. That's the main point I wanted to make on this. Good
so
old
good
the first census, I should say. That doesn't include the Levites because that's something that we get into in chapter 3 and chapter 4. So
that's right. It is a separate thing. It's not included in what is very clearly a formulaic presentation, and that formula just goes like this. It says, "These are the names of the men who shall assist you. From Reuben, Elizur, son of Shedeur, from Simeon." And the way that it is presented is repetitious. This is the formula. But what you see in verse 10 and also in verse 32 is the insertion, breaking that formula and inserting from the sons of Joseph. And so we have from the sons of Joseph, and then it says, and then it re-enters that the formula with Manasseh and then Ephraim and then Manasseh. And in verse 32, it does the same thing. It has that little insertion of from the sons of Joseph, which we would expect if they have to launder him into the tribal text. Go ahead.
No, I'm ready whenever you are. One of the notes that I wanted to get to in my notes, and I don't know where it falls in because you've got some good stuff too, is the idea that we seem to have an image of men of war. They're counting from 20 up, and it has to do with men of war. Is that right? Is that the way you understand that?
Yep.
So one of the things that you and I noticed when we first started looking at the Moses Scroll text is that it doesn't say men of war, does it?
It says the men of the rebellion, as opposed to men of war or men of battle, as it might appear in other translations. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't know what your thoughts were on that, but I found it interesting that in the book of Numbers, particularly when we get this census and you're dealing with count those that are 20 years old and upward, it has to do with battle preparation. You're dealing, in fact, some of this to do with paying a ransom is associated with the troops, right? And so when I think about that, and I think about some of the text in other places in the Pentateuch, the emphasis is not on the men of war, and that made me think of the way that always these men in the wilderness are described. That generation are called the men of the rebellion in the Moses Scroll. Anyway, just something that hit me as I worked through the notes.
Yeah, no, that was cool. You mentioned that just before the show, and I had missed that completely, but it's definitely worth pointing out. Something else that is worth pointing out before we break out of this census, Ross, is that very few scholars find this credible. The numbers here, first of all, are all rounded to the 100. I think except for Gad, who was rounded to the 50, but they're all rounded to the 100, and clearly, in reality, they would not have been rounded to the 100. Furthermore, the numbers are huge. It does not comport with verses like, for example, Joshua 4:13, that puts the number of fighting men at 40,000, I think. And even 40,000 is a lot if you're also trying to claim that Israel was chosen because they were a people fewest in numbers. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 7 says, right? 40,000 is stadium size. And I like the way that Gray puts it in the International Critical Commentary of the Book of Numbers. He says, this is entirely unhistorical, unreal, and impossible. What are your thoughts about these numbers?
Well, I tell you, I've seen different arguments. First of all, it's not always the same. The priestly writer does give us this extraordinary number of men, just men, excluding Levites, which is more tens of thousands, at 603,550. But I just flipped open in Exodus 12:37. It says about 600,000 men on foot besides children. So it's about 600,000 until they count them, and then they nail it so accurately to 603,550. But that's just the men. So what we've estimated is that this brings us to a figure of nearly 2.5 to 3 million people, and I think it's exaggerated as well. Now, let me ask you this, though. Some have argued, and Friedman does not go with this. He says that a lot of people try to say that the word for thousand, the root word is aleph, lamed pei, and that could mean clans. So instead of 600 some odd thousand, it could be 600 clans. And that would bring the number down quite a bit. But if you look at Friedman's notes on this, he said clearly the writer, whether you believe it or accept the huge number or not, the writer has in mind hundreds of thousands. And so he says you can't get away with trying to excuse that number by the writer. The writer wants you to see that many.
Yeah, that's right.
But I don't think it's realistic, really.
I don't think it's realistic. No archaeologist will defend it, because if there were such a massive amount of people moving through the wilderness, you would find overwhelming evidence for that, and they simply don't. I am in favor of the writer, the priestly writer, actually intending us to believe that these were the numbers. And the reason why I suspect that is the case is because of a paper that was brought out by Broyd and Weiner entitled A Mathematical Analysis of the Division of the Tribes and the Role of the Levites on Gerizim and Deval in Deuteronomy chapter 27. And what they do is they look at that, and we'll get there eventually. We'll talk about this more when we're there. But what they do in this paper, and they do it very well, is they take, now remember there's two competing lists, and in Deuteronomy it has Levi and Joseph. They take that list, and they take the numbers here in the book of Numbers and also in the latter census that you referred to of Generation B, and they do some very reasonable math with a little bit of assumption in this paper. It's quite clever. It's like I said, it's not unreasonable, and what they end up with is what they refer to as an equal numerical split between these two mountains. And they say this is the reason why these tribes are placed here and these tribes are placed here. It's looking for an equal numerical split, and they almost get there. Like, it's very, very close, and it's impressive. Now, if that is intentional math, Ross, then that would suggest that the material that we're dealing with now is post Josiah revised version of Deuteronomy. It's taken that ritual and the way that it's presented there, and then it's done some clever math with that, applied the numbers and put it here. And I think most, as we've mentioned before, most critical scholars would say this could be, post-Babylonian for all we know. It seems to be very, very late, the priestly material. That bears out. So I think if the math is intentional, and like I say, people can go to that paper and have a look at it and see if they're convinced, then these massive numbers are there for a reason.
They are massive numbers. Interesting. Yep.
All right.
Census.
Now, the census. So you've already said, 46, verse 46, all who were enrolled came to 603,550. Verse 47, the Levites, however, Ross, and remember I was just saying this is what we're looking for. We're looking for clues of laundering the Levites and Joseph into the tribal lists. So we've already had the break of the formula to insert Joseph. Don't forget about Joseph, by the way. Manasseh and Ephraim, they're Joseph boys. I'm going to put that here. And here in verse 47, don't forget about the Levites. They're a totally separate thing. They're going to be separate from this census. We don't need to include them in the census, and this is the reason why. This is what you find. The Levites, however, were not recorded among them by their ancestral tribe. For the Lord had spoken to Moses, saying, hey, don't be counting the Levites. Don't do that. What we're going to do, we're going to treat them differently. We're going to do it like this. And so this is what we have until the end of the chapter.
Let me ask Ezra, because in my mind there's quite a bit actually where the Levites aren't counted, and there's various rules regarding the Levites. Let me ask Ezra, what do critical scholars think about that particular idea?
The Levites, always present, yet curiously absent in the head counts. Critical scholars see this as more than just a narrative quirk. It's a window into the evolution of Israelite religion and the shifting status of the Levites over time. In Numbers, especially this priestly material, Levi isn't left out because they're unimportant. They're set apart. The priestly writer elevates the Levites as sacred functionaries, assigned to the tabernacle, exempt from military duties and tribal landholding. So their exclusion from the census is theological. They don't belong to Israel in the same way the other tribes do. They belong to Wahwa. Now, the repetition of Levi's omission or variable inclusion in different texts, like in Genesis 49 or Deuteronomy 33, reflects source differences. For example, J and E often treat the Levites ambiguously, while P formalizes them into a priestly caste. Their exclusion in some lists and inclusion in others shows that Levi's role was contested or developing across different communities. At its core, scholars see this as a reflection of competing priesthoods. The priestly source is advocating for a centralized, hereditary priesthood rooted in Levi, especially Aaron's line, while other traditions may reflect older, more decentralized cultic practices where local shrines and various clans had priestly roles. So Levi's exclusion isn't accidental. It's a narrative maneuver in a theological turf war.
Theological turf war.
I could not have put it better. I think that is really good because not only are they trying to launder them in as a tribe, which they are not in the Moses Scroll, but we have to also recognize that there are competing priesthoods, right? We see that in the text as well. So yes, theological turf war. That's really good. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, yeah, I totally agree.
Just because I remembered something, and we won't go into it, but I remember one of our first conversations years and years ago involved, the question of where is Levi in all of this, and it was an emblem we were looking at, and we got to we were looking
I'm very
at
protective. I am very protective of it because my father's line is Levitical, right? So I'm quite proud of that, and I'm like, yeah, this is great. I felt like I had a certain duty to the text, and I was quite protective of that status, right? And you had suggested, certain things about from a critical perspective in the text, and I was quite defensive of that. For a number of years, we had that, and you really bothered me. But it wasn't until the Moses Scroll. Actually, you know what? It was the Abal Gerizim paper that I produced that I had to eventually concede that what Dershowitz mentions in his book, the Valediction of Moses, is true, and that is that the Levites are not treated as a tribe in the Moses Scroll. And once you realize that the Levites are those who accompany, those who are joined to Israel, then you can't unsee it. When you see how they are laundered into the text as an evolving status and sort of laundered in as a tribe, it can't be unseen. And we have the priestly class to thank for all of this tabernacle, temple, sacrifice, all of this minutia that just does not exist in the Moses Scroll, Ross.
Yeah, it's just interesting. What really caused me to bring this up years ago when you and I started discussing some of these things is that sometimes and I didn't know why, and it's still up for debate. A lot of academics go back and forth on this. Sometimes the list includes Levi, sometimes it doesn't. And so that's why I wanted to ask that question of Ezra, and I want people to think about that. What is it about Levi? Why is it that sometimes they're listed, sometimes they're not? Interesting.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people are going to be going, I don't like the sound of this. Well, let me tell you, I was reluctant for literally years, to entertain such ideas until I could not, I had to deal with it. And then I saw it, and then, like I say, you can't unsee it once you see it.
Right.
Chapter 2, Ross. So the end of
we
Numbers
got our
chapter
work
1.
cut out for us. We have a lot left.
We got a lot left. It's saying, look, the Levites, you don't have to count them. Don't worry about that. They're special. They're going to be around the tabernacle, and you guys are going to be camped around about. So now we have then another list. And what we have here in chapter 2 is the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, the Israelites shall camp, each with his standard, under the banner of their ancestral houses. They shall camp around the tent of meeting at a distance. And what we have is the configuration. Can I say the configuration?
Yeah.
Or the arrangement of tribal camps. And the way that we have it, and we've talked about this before, is remarkably similar to the 13th century BCE relief of Ramesses II's military camp, his configuration at the Battle of Kadesh, all the way down to the two cherubs guarding Pharaoh's cartouche on either side, winged cherubs in the inner chamber, or the Holy of Holies, if you like. Your thoughts?
I have seen some of that, and it is remarkable when you compare some of that. Have you ever seen, was it drawn out, if you see the troop arrangements in the Egyptian camp, is it set up in the shape of, for lack of a better way, like a cross, or where you have camps on the north, camps on the south, on the east, and the west? I know that Christianity makes a big deal, or some Christian interpreters make a big deal of that. That's not what I was bringing up. I was bringing up, is it that closely comparable when you look at...
When you look at the relief? It is remarkable. Yeah, I would encourage everyone to look that relief up. It's accessible on the internet. You can see that. Ramesses II Battle of Kadesh camp formation. Just look that up and you'll see it there, and you can make the comparisons yourself. In fact, I was looking at various study Bibles yesterday, and an NIV Bible of all things had a study Bible had a picture of this particular relief in the Book of Numbers to compare with. I mean, it really is overwhelming, and it is my opinion that what we're reading here in the configuration of the way that the tribes are camped around the tabernacle is borrowed from this relief. They've looked at this and they've gone, I remember our ancestors, that had something to do with the Battle of Kadesh, Ramesses II, right? This must be, see the cherub here? That's going to be
this is the way we were camped,
This is the way we're going to do it. Like, this is our story. Let's just appropriate this. I'm sure that's the way it happened. And scholars such as Joshua Berman would agree.
By the way, there is a lot of association. A lot of academics have discovered. I mean, think about it. The children of Israel, let's say they're in Egypt for several hundred years, and they're going to reflect, if that is provable, that they've been in Egypt, then they're going to have certain elements which look like ancient Egypt. And so we see, in fact, I have some of Hoffmeier's works and some of these other scholars' works who associate the connections between ancient Egypt and ancient Israel, at least in the storytelling. And when you look at these things, one of the things that always comes to my mind when I'm in the priestly material is that Richard Elliott Friedman said we have 13 names of Egyptian origin in the Pentateuch, and all 13 are Levites. There's something going on there. There's something. And then if we think that the name Levi somehow has something to do with one who is joining, or it sounds like the Hebrew word that, So there's something going on there. There's something in the memory of the writers that is connecting, making these odd connections.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm not suggesting that those who accompanied Israel are the ones that eventually built themselves into a higher, powerful class of priests. I'm not necessarily suggesting that. What I think is that there were a class of aristocrats who looked at the text and said, hey, we have an opportunity here. Who are these Levites? What can we do with that? Perhaps we can convince everybody that that's us, perhaps the sons of Aaron, the Aaronic lineage. Let's just tell them that we're the Levites. This is another, let's turn this into a tribe, maybe, right?
All right.
I don't know, but maybe. So there is that.
Are you ready to go to 3?
We got to go to 3 because we got to rip through this. We are now in 3. By the way, Ross, in this configuration, the tent is inside the camp. When we get to chapter 12, which is E material, the tent is located outside the camp, but we'll touch on that when we get there.
Yeah. Look, I was going to say in chapter 3, there is a phrase here that we should all be familiar with. These are the generations, in Hebrew, Ele Toledot. This is the first time, Jono, that this phrase is used since Genesis. It was used 10 times in Genesis, sort of carried the story along, and it's attributed to the redactor. So here we see it again. Ele Toledot. It's like a way that the redactor is pulling these various stories together that are at his disposal. So I found that pretty interesting.
By the way, just before we jump out of chapter 2, here's that little Jedi mind trick once again in Numbers chapter 2, verse 33. The Levites, however, after all the counting of the tribes and their placement and all that sort of stuff, the Levites, however, were not recorded among the Israelites as the Lord had commanded Moses. So, there's a reason why we don't count the Levites here, and don't worry, but you don't need to know about it. Let's keep going.
That's right.
Chapter 3, yes. So Nadab and Abihu, we are reminded of these guys, and it's interesting because in verse 4, but Nadab and Abihu died by the will of the Lord when they offered alien fire before the Lord in the wilderness of Sinai, and they left no sons. Well, that's convenient, right? They have no. Where are their descendants today? Oh, no, they don't have any because we kind of made them up. We placed them under Aaron to incriminate him with the story of Jeroboam, with his sons Nadab and Abiyahu. Yeah. Now, is it Leviticus chapter 16, Ross? It is Leviticus chapter 16. What is the reason given there for these guys being consumed by God? It says
offered strange fire, right?
Does it though? It says oh, I have.
You mean Leviticus chapter 10, right?
I thought it was. It is Leviticus chapter 10 where it happens.
Yeah.
But then it picks up. Oh, yeah, it is verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron who died when they drew too close to the presence of the Lord, Ross. That's the reason given in Leviticus chapter 16. And you're right, it's different to Leviticus chapter 10. It says, no, they brought strange fire. Here in Numbers chapter 3, it agrees with Leviticus chapter 10 and not Leviticus chapter 16. All right.
All right. On. Okay.
3:40 to 51. Oh, look at this. Okay, so I have a question. I have a question for you, Ross.
Where are you at? What are you at?
I'm in chapter 3, and I'm at verse 40 and on. Unless you want to bring something out prior to this.
No, I mean I just want to say that Kohath is very important, but we don't have to get into that right now. Let's keep going.
Well, my question is this, Ross.
Kohath is a big deal, I think. But go
ahead. Well, do you want to highlight him before we move forward?
No, I want to keep going. The
Lord said to Moses, record every firstborn male of the Israelite people from the age of 1 month up and make a list of their names. And take the Levites for me, the Lord, in place of every firstborn among the Israelite people and the cattle, Ross, of the Levites in place of every firstborn among the cattle of the Israelites. So Moses recorded all the firstborn among the Israelites as the Lord had commanded him. All the firstborn males, as listed by name, recorded from the age of 1 month up, came to 22,273. Now, that figure in and of itself is problematic when you look at the overall math. We don't have to go into that. But
good.
But it goes on. Lord spoke to Moses saying, take the Levites in place of all the firstborn among the Israelite people. So what I'm trying to figure out here, Ross, what exactly is going on? Because it is redemption money. We're to understand from verse 51, this is redemption money.
Okay.
He gave the redemption money to Aaron and his sons at the Lord's bidding, as the Lord had commanded Moses. Is this a continuation of the firstborn that were spared during the Exodus chapter 12, 13, by painting the blood of the lamb on the doorposts? If that is the case, is this to be understood where God says, okay, look, I'm going to, the angel of death is going to pass through, going to wipe out all of the firstborn of the Egyptians, won't kill yours if you paint blood on your doorposts, then I'll see and I'll be like, oh, not this one. But don't be thinking you're getting off scot-free. Every time you have a firstborn, you're going to have to. There's got to be some. You got to redeem. There's got to be some redemption money for that. Otherwise, I'm going to kill them. Is that what we're looking at here?
I don't know. Or is that what you think? It's making the same connection there. I'm looking.
It seems like it's a perpetual danger. Is my point.
Well, Exodus 13 is something that comes to mind. This is similar. It's similarly worded, and it connects with that same time frame when the children of Israel are leaving Egypt. So, to your point, I'm just looking at Exodus 13 now. You shall set apart to the Lord all that first opens the womb, all the firstborn of your livestock. Similar to what we see here, that are males shall be the Lord's. But every firstborn donkey you shall redeem with a sheep. If you don't redeem it, you have to break its neck. Jono, every firstborn male among your children shall you redeem.
Now that's got to be hard to do, to break a donkey's neck.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, it can't be enjoyable for the donkey. That's a bit rough.
It seems a little odd.
But the writer wants us to believe that this is divinely imposed upon the people. But it seems to me like having a firstborn is a perpetual danger that you have to rectify.
Because they're always in danger is what you're saying.
Well, it seems like God is saying, if you do not redeem them, I will take their life.
I don't know.
All right. Leave that up to the people in the comments. Comment in the comment section below what your thoughts are.
Help
about
us out there.
passage.
Help us to make some sense of that.
All right, now we are at your favoritist part. Actually, before we do get to the favoritist part, chapter 4, verse 3, Ross, Leviticus, the Levites serve from the age of 30. This is verse 3. 4:3 says the Levites serve from the age of 30. It's great. They don't have to start work until they're 30. And not only that, Ross, but they get to retire when they're 50. They've got this little 20-year window of work in the tabernacle or in the temple, wherever they're serving, and then that's it. They get to retire. I mean, it's a great deal. Except that in Numbers chapter 8, verse 24, they start at the age of 25. And in Ezra chapter 3, verse 8, they start at the age of 20. So which is it?
Hey, let me ask Ezra that. Let me see if Ezra knows that. Can I?
Done. Let's do it.
That's a sharp observation, and one that gets right to the heart of how different priestly traditions developed over time. In Numbers 4:3, the service age starts at 30, but then Numbers 8:24 drops it to 25. And by the time we get to Ezra 3:8, it's all the way down to 20. So what gives? From a critical perspective, this isn't just sloppy editing. It reflects evolving institutional needs and historical contexts. The Numbers 4:3 reference is likely older priestly material, possibly from a time when the priesthood was smaller and more exclusive. Think elite sacred service requiring maturity and experience. But by Numbers 8:24, we're probably dealing with a different layer of priestly writing, or a redactor trying to adjust expectations, maybe to allow for earlier training or apprenticeship. Still elite, but with more room for practical involvement. Then in Ezra 3:8, we're post-exilic. The Second Temple has just been built, the returnees are few, and the cultic system is trying to reestablish itself. Lowering the age to 20 likely reflects a pragmatic move. Fewer priests, more work to do, and a temple in need of staff. This isn't theology, it's administration. So these age differences are like strata in the sediment of Israel's cultic history. They show us how priestly expectations weren't fixed. They adapted based on need, politics, and the size of the priestly workforce.
Well,
okay,
interesting.
I could buy that, Ross, because I do recall in the book of Ezra, I kind of feel like it's Ezra chapter 6, verse 62, something like that, that they are taking the names of Levites, and there are certain Levites that come forward and say, yeah, we're Levites, and they say, okay, so tell us your lineage, and they don't know it. So they were excluded from serving, it says, because they couldn't prove their lineage. So maybe they are wanting for priests, and therefore, okay, you guys are going to have to start at the age of 20. Maybe I can see that. I can buy that.
It's an interesting answer. Appreciate that, Ezra.
What else, Ross?
I'm ready to jump into 5. Just we don't have to go too deep in it, but yeah, this is one of the strangest laws, I think. Are you ready to jump into the suspected adulteress?
Chapter 5, in case you missed Leviticus chapter 13 and 14, chapter 5 brings the goods and tells us more about leprosy and all that sort of bits and pieces.
Right.
It has a strange verse
purity
8.
Laws.
It has purity laws. This is an interesting one, Ross. If the man has no... Oh, this is... Okay, so let's start from verse 5. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the Israelites. When a man or a woman commits any wrong toward a fellow man, thus breaking faith with the Lord, and that person realizes his guilt, he shall confess the wrong that he has done. He shall make restitution in the principal amount, adding 1/5 to it and giving it to him who he has wronged. However, Ross, if the man has no kinsman to whom restitution can be made, the amount can be repaid, that should be repaid shall go to the priest. Give it to the priest. That's a little bit. Who is the man that he has wronged, and where has he gone? Has he wronged him in a way that has killed him? And then you have to find a kinsman redeemer, so to speak, to make some sort of. I mean, I thought the death penalty was imposed upon such people. It's a curious verse. It doesn't really make sense. But moving forward, what we have is your favorite passage in the whole of the Bible, from verse 11 and on, and that is the spirit of jealousy. Go ahead, Ross.
Yeah, I tell you what. Every time I read it now, I have to think about. There is a certain biblical scholar I interviewed with this person, and we were talking about the Moses scroll. And one of the things that this scholar said was, they believed, they hadn't studied the Moses scroll, they hadn't read any of the academic back and forth, they were totally uninvolved in the whole unfolding of this, but they said, this person said, I believe it's false because you say that the ink, according to Shapiro, was virtually undestroyable, is the way he put it. And this evidently clued this scholar friend of ours in that this has got to be fake. And he got into this, well, there's two different kinds of ink, and there's gall, and there's this, and there's that. And you have to have this particular ink that will be dissolved in water because of the ritual of the suspected adulteress. Now, I know I'm kind of beating around the bush, but I remember thinking, but this person doesn't even accept the stories, the line of thinking from Judaica, from which we get the idea of the. In other words, what this person was saying is that when the woman was called up to be, I guess, go through this ordeal, something is written on a piece of leather or whatever, and it's put into this water that is made from maim kaim, living water, and dirt from the floor of the tabernacle, and you mix all this together, and the curse, the words of the curse have to disappear into the water. Anyway, I think that is the most bizarre reason to say that something is fake that you've not even studied. But this weird ritual is one that always gives me pause. Because it just seems so far-fetched for a lot of reasons. It almost feels like it is written by men who want to make sure that their women don't run around on them. You know, like they're saying, honey, if, all I got to do is bring you to the priest. And I don't know. What do you think? I mean, do you think this actually...
Even if she has nothing to hide, if she has not committed... adultery, this is incredibly demeaning. This is just so demeaning. And what it is a priestly magical incantation. So if a man has a spirit of jealousy and he suspects that his wife has committed adultery, then he brings her to the priest, and this magical incantation takes place. And she has no choice. She is made to drink this filthy water.
I want to see somebody make Bridget drink this. This is what I'm saying. Like I have said many times that ride to, first of all, you'd have to trick a lot of women. You're like, honey, I just need you to come with me. We'll be right. We're not going to be gone that long, but
Yep.
I mean, what's he going to say?
No, it wouldn't fly today.
No.
But if you were in, because men have afforded women certain protections, in Western culture, that she would not have to put up with this sort of nonsense.
Yeah.
But if you were, say, in Iran today or Afghanistan today, and there was such a ritual, you would have no.
And there probably is.
You would have no. You would have to go through with it. You'd have to drink this filthy water. And what this actually is, I think, is a whole lot of euphemistic vocabulary that results in what the priestly writer wants us to believe is a divinely imposed, induced abortion if the woman has conceived by another man.
From another man. Yeah.
From another man. Because what we see in verse 21 in a English Bible, in the Hebrew, I think it's verse 20, it literally says, if another man has put his semen in you. So what we're dealing with is she is conceived by another man. The husband is suspicious. He takes his wife to his woman to the priest. The priest does this incantation and says to her, if you are pregnant by another man, may that pregnancy result in a miscarriage. And I think we're dealing with euphemistic language here to that end. And that's horrific when you think about it. I mean, imagine, particularly in light of the seventh commandment in the Moses scroll, do not lift my name to deceit. But what's actually happening here is it's saying that God will kill the child for the sins of the mother and the father, which is a topic that we've talked about in detail, and we'll probably go into that in detail in another show again. What are your thoughts?
Man, I tell you, back to your point about, and I say, well, now it would be very difficult, but there are certain cultures where some of these rituals do still exist, and they always feel a little bit magical, mystical. But, for instance, I saw a video someone forwarded me not too long ago as a result of me mentioning this particular ritual, and it was of a Bedouin, a woman who was accused of some crime against her husband, and she was forced to, there was a hot, like a pan that you would cook, a Bedouin would cook a meal over a campfire, and they get it super, super hot, and then make the woman lick it 3 times. And, I mean, it's just, these things are just, they seem so, barbaric. And I don't know. Primitive. I mean, it just, some of this stuff is just, it fits that barbaric, ancient feel. Yeah.
It is curious in verse 22, speaking of the Moses scroll, it borrows from the formula of the blessing and the curse ceremony. So what we have is the curse, or the potential curse, if she is guilty, being imposed upon her. May this water induce the spell, enter your body, causing your belly to extend and your thigh to sag, and the woman shall say, Amen, Amen. So it's like that calling out, as the Levites calling out, this is the curse, and the people respond, Amen. So she accepts it upon her,
Right.
And she probably doesn't have much choice but to do that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So this whole thing, now, just in my notes I had that adultery, if you look at Leviticus 20, verse 10, that a person convicted of adultery, both parties are to be put to death. The man who takes the wife of another, or a woman of another, and the woman of another.
If it can be proven, right? If you have witnesses, you can prove it.
That's right.
Here it's just suspicion. Yeah.
Yeah, in verse 13, if a man has had intercourse with her, but it is hidden from her husband, so that she is undetected, though she has defiled herself, and there's no witness against her, since she was not caught in the act. See, so here is the thing. This, we don't really have proof, so the husband is appealing to the priest, or to God through
he's appealing to
the
Jehovah,
agency of the priest. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, and so it reminds me, the one being caught in the act, it just reminds me of the story in John chapter 8 and verse 4, where the men bring this woman who they stress this part. She's been caught in the act. So this isn't a case of a suspected adulteress, but we caught this girl, right? And so it's a different story. But at least that phrase, that's the only other place I can think of where that phrase is used.
And that's where, just remind me, because I'm just remembering that. It's interesting. They claim, they bring her and they claim, oh, we caught her in the act. What are you going to do about it? And he's like, well, Jesus is like, well, I didn't catch her in the act.
Yeah.
You're the ones who apparently caught her.
Yeah,
so
I guess one of you
without
stoned
sin
her.
Cast the first stone. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh,
it's actually a pretty interesting
we actually wanted to see what you were going to do.
Yeah.
Trying to catch him out.
Yeah.
All right. So chapter 6, Ross, shall we jump into chapter 6? We are ripping through this.
Yep. We need to rip through it. Yeah.
We need to.
The
what we have is the Nazarites. This is a quit. What are the nature of the Nazarites? I have always suspected that the Nazarites are a family that observe certain rituals or certain observations or certain levels of abstinence or whatever. As a we are holier than thou. We're sort of like the.
I always call it the hyper holy.
The hyper holy, that's good. And it reminds me kind of the Rechabites, like in Jeremiah, where God's saying to the children of Israel, correct me if I'm wrong, he's saying, look, can't you guys be more like the Rechabites? Like they say they have a certain code where they say, you know what, we're not going to drink. We just don't drink. Don't ask us to have a beer with you, because that's the thing we don't do. We're Rechabites, we don't drink. Reminds me of the Druze. Druze have certain observations as well that they stick to.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like the Nazarites are perhaps an ancient tradition that has developed over time, and then people outside of that family, outside of the tribe of the Nazarites, have gone, hey, these guys are the hyper holy. I'd like to be kind of hyper holy. It seems kind of cool. In the same way that people in the 60s and 70s used to go over to India and and do a little bit of that. What are your thoughts on the Nazarites?
Well, it is interesting that in some ways, some of the commentaries will suggest that what we have here is, in a way, a common person, a man or a woman, can commit themselves to requirements that are even more strict in some ways than the priesthood. So you, in effect, a person who takes on this voluntary vow is becoming hyper holy, more holy than they need be, but they're committing themselves to a certain restriction. That, no one says that they have to go without wine or grapes or anything associated with, but they choose that for a period of time. So I think that's one of the things that stands out. It's like anybody can commit to it. Now, I know people men and women, who have said, "Oh, I can't eat that because I've taken on a Nazarite vow." What they don't do generally is, when they come off of it, is shave all of their bodily hair. See, it's like people just sort of pick and choose. No, they don't. They don't pick that part. Now, some may, but I mean, a lot of them don't.
Listen,
but it made me think. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to ask you, for what? For what? What is the benefit? But here's my question: what is the benefit of observing the vow of the Nazarite and becoming hyper holy? When you are finished with your vow, what does it afford you? What is the benefit here?
Well, I can tell you what it did for Samson.
Well, but what does it say here? Does it say here, and then God will?
You'll be super strong, make you strong.
You'll be. It doesn't say that. Does it say any sort of additional blessing? Anything?
No. Does it list a benefit?
For what?
I don't know that it does.
For what?
Well, I think it's not
just to show everyone that you're.
Well, it may be something where someone says, it's not what God can do for me, but what I can do for God. It may be.
And in what way is observing these rules serving God? What does this do for him?
I'm not suggesting that it does anything for them, but they might believe that it does. So some people might say, I'm going to dedicate myself for a period of time. I'm not going to consume any alcohol. I'm not going to taste of any grape, which is something quite refreshing. I'm going to give that up. Like today in modern religion, some people give up certain things for Lent, Catholics and so forth. It's not that God says, oh, good, they gave up chocolate, now I can work with them. But they feel it's a way that they're giving up and refusing to partake. That's just my thought. It doesn't really say that, but in any way they are dedicating themselves for a certain period of time. Now, the other interesting thing is that you have a couple of famous Nazarites, whether you're talking about Samuel,
Samson,
you have Samson.
One,
Samson's one.
Samuel was a Nazarite.
Yeah.
Right.
Remember his mother. His mother dedicates him to a life of Nazarite. In the case of Samson, the messenger, the Malach, tells the parents of Samson that this child will be a Nazarite from the time of his birth.
They were the ones that. Well, he told them, and they decided it wasn't something that he entered into. It wasn't a vow that he was born into that vow. Yeah,
that's right.
Mm-hmm.
What else on the Nazarites? Anything else?
Oh, come on, you've got more Nazarites. Who else? Who else is some famous? Come on.
No, huh? No, go ahead.
No more famous Nazarites. That's it.
Well, I just had a couple of them jotted down just because I knew that we could talk about some of that if we wanted to. I just don't know how much time we have. Are you thinking of some other famous Nazarites? Who else you got? Who you got?
I just thought you had more on your list. That's all.
No, I mean there are, but I didn't. I just picked a couple.
All right, so listen. The end of chapter 6, the hyper holy. End of chapter 6 brings us to the Silver Scroll, Ross. This is now, okay, so if you look it up on the wiki, and I happen to have the wiki open here. Here it is, and it says the Ketef Hinnom scrolls, or otherwise known as the Ketef Hinnom amulets, which is probably more accurate, are the oldest surviving text currently known from the Hebrew Bible, Ross. Is that true?
Right. Well, that's what they say. They may not know about something that we know about.
They might not know about the Moses Scroll. Dated to 600 BCE. The text
but certainly among those things which are dated. Let me just add that.
Yes,
certainly among those which have been.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can agree with that. Text written in Paleo-Hebrew script is at least partially from the Book of Numbers in the Hebrew Bible and has been described as one of the most significant discoveries ever made for biblical studies. 2 silver scrolls were uncovered in 1979. An archaeological site southwest, this is Ketef Hinnom, I think we call Bible Hill in English, an archaeological site southwest of the old city of Jerusalem, and were found to contain a variation of priestly blessing found in Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 to 26. This is where we are. The scrolls were dated paleographically to the late 7th century or early 6th century BCE, placing them in the First Temple period. Now, you and I were there.
That's right.
I think last time we were there was 2022.
Been a couple of years now, yeah.
Been a few years. But it is a cool place to go to.
We actually went down in what they call chamber 25 of cave 24 is what they call it. And we talked about where Gabriel Bar Kai, and he had the student, and the kid was always on his nerves and, bothering him. And he said, look, just go in there and clean. And didn't he fall through like a false ceiling? And that's how he found it? Yeah.
And that's how he found it. And he brought them up and he said, hey, check this out. Now, the thing that's fascinating about this story, and I love it, is that this little 13-year-old Jimmy that was a volunteer that Barkai said, look, go and busy yourself over there. Stop bothering me. Okay. Then he finds the oldest. I don't think we know who he is. I don't think he's ever come forward and said, I'm that guy.
I don't know.
To my knowledge. If anyone knows anything about that, put it in the comments. Love to hear about it, but I don't think we do. In any case, it is very, very close to the priestly blessing that we're about to read here. And this is verse 22 and on. The Lord spoke to Moses, speak to Aaron and to his sons, thus you shall bless the people of Israel. Say to them, the Lord bless you and protect you. The Lord deal kindly and graciously with you. The Lord bestow his favor upon you and grant you peace. Thus they shall. Now, this is verse 27, Ross. I'm interested in what it says in your Torah tablet. Thus they shall link my name with the people of Israel, and I will bless them. What do you have?
So they shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them, is the way that it reads. And
you have them as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No.
Well, I'm just saying, I think if you look at the Hebrew, I think what it actually says is, I will bless you. So what it actually says is, thus you shall link my name with the people of Israel, and I will bless you. And it then obviously raises the question, well, who is the you?
It is plural, though. You plural.
Oh, yous. I will bless yous.
Mm-hmm.
I will bless y'all, as you guys say there in the South. And I will bless y'all. Is the y'all Aaron and his sons?
Mm-hmm. And that's a good point. Good question.
Ibn Ezra thinks so.
I don't know.
Ibn Ezra thinks so. And in doing so, Ibn Ezra is saying, God will bless Aaron and his sons, and Aaron and his sons act as the conduit of God's blessing. They then bless the people.
Hey, can you do your hands? Can you do your hands like this?
Well, I can't see at the moment, but like this one?
Yeah.
The magical Star Trek
That's right.
Kohanim hands. The hand blessing.
And of course, that Leonard Nimoy made famous the Vulcan symbol, and most of our viewers probably know that. But he tells the story that he peeped on, I think it was Yom Kippur, and he saw the rabbi doing that or someone in the synagogue making that sign, and that's how he got the sign for the Vulcan.
There you go. Yeah, that's right. I remember reading that.
Spock. That's right.
Old Spock. Hey, so listen, we are now in chapter 7, and you did mention something of the Kohathites. So you want to pick up on that now, because we're reading about those guys again.
I just think that it's interesting, because all the way back in chapter 4, where we're told the different duties of the priesthood and so forth, the thing that made me think about the Kohathites is that we're told that it's they, among all the Levites. We have the 3 sons of Aaron, and then among those sons, they have different duties assigned. And the Kohathites are assigned, and we get told this numerous texts in the Hebrew Bible, that they were assigned the most holy things. And so among the things that they're responsible for, according to the priestly pen, is they're responsible for the ark and all the furniture inside the holiest of places. Now, the interesting thing about this is you can't have a group of Levites who have a duty more important than the sons of Aaron. So it's almost as if the writer wants us to know, they have the responsibility for the ark, but they can't ever look at it. They can't ever touch it until the sons of Aaron come in and cover it all up, or they'll die. But it almost feels forced, because the Kohathites seem to have a very important task or several important jobs, and I just find that interesting. So the bottom line is, if we see in these texts, for instance, Deuteronomy 31, at least a third-person narrative there, where someone says that Moses finished writing the Torah to the very end, he gives it to the priest, the Levites, who carry the ark. Well, that's specifically the Kohathites, and I just think that whatever a person does with that, you can't just. It's not just any old Levite, but it's the Kohathites, and we're going to get more into the priestly families and so forth as we work through this material. That was the only thing I wanted to bring up, and it actually ties in with something in chapter 4, really. So,
okay. So once again, in chapter 7, from verse 10 and on, we enter into another formulaic presentation. And in this case, it's the chieftains who brought the dedication offering for the altar upon its anointing. So we have the story of Hanukkah, the rededication of the temple. We have a dedication of the altar. And the Lord said to Moses, let them present their offering for dedication of the altar, one chieftain each day. And when we go through the list of chieftains, what we have is a list of 12 tribes, and that list concurs with the list that we have in the Moses scroll, although in a different order, we don't have the insertion of the reminder of Joseph prior to Ephraim and Manasseh. They've left that out. And of course, the Levites aren't included in bringing a dedication there. So that's interesting. I find that particularly interesting. Any observation on your part?
Yeah, the only other thing is that this is one of the clues that helps me pull the dating and the chronology together, which I'm planning to get into this coming Shabbat. And that is that, cool. You know, when you look at it's very clear that in Numbers chapter 7, verses 1 and 11, it gives us a date. So we're dealing with the second year, the first month, and we even know the days. So day 2 through 12, those are the days, but it's not just any old day 2 through 12. It's a calendar date. So what we have Numbers chapter 7, verses 12 through 89 is leading up to Passover, which is described, which would be day 14 of the first month, right? So people often miss the chronology, the clues, but I've got it all here on a page. And what I've discovered is that not only do we pull Exodus 38 all the way up into the dating of the census, but we also can put dates on other things. And chronologically, things make a lot more sense if we put things in the right order. Let me just give you one example of how confusing the order is. If I gave you a book that had 8 chapters, but I arranged the chapters this way: chapter 1, chapter 6, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 7, chapter 2, and chapter 8. Would it make a lot of sense if you read it?
It's not going to be helpful, Ross. Don't do that.
It's going to be a little bit confusing, wouldn't it? Wouldn't you think? Yeah. Well, that's exactly what we have here from Exodus all the way through Numbers chapter 10, verse 11. I gave you very real numbers there. And so I hope to set all this straight this coming weekend and give people a little bit better chronology there.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. Just on that, can we remind everyone that the latest Torah tablet, the Numbers Torah tablet, is available?
That's right.
You know, if you order it now, you'll get it in time. Yep.
That's right. It is available. The link is in the description. And I just submitted to my editor-in-chief, who's also the director of the show, Seth. And he poked out a little while ago, stuck his head out of his office. He's already got Deuteronomy in the process of going through publication. So that'll be ready very soon. So we're excited.
Ending this Torah portion, Ross, and I'm interested again in what the Torah tablet says. This is verse 89 of chapter 7. When Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with him, Jehovah, he would hear the voice. I have voice capitalized. I don't know if that happens anywhere else. Voice addressing him from above the cover that was on top of the Ark of the Pact between the 2 cherubim. Thus he spoke to him. What do you have in that verse?
It's very close. It's close to what I have in the ASV, which is the translation we use in the tablets. When Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with him, then he heard the voice, capital V, speaking unto him, from above the mercy seat that was upon the ark of the testimony, from between the 2 cherubim, and he spake unto him. Very interesting.
What is that? Is that Hakol? Is that what that is?
Let's see.
Because I wonder if the capitalized the voice is Hakol. I wonder if this is the only place where that appears. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Put it in the comments, people. That is our Torah portion. Next week, we are going to be in Behar Elotecha. And that, I think, Ross, finally, we get to break out of the priestly material somewhere in this Torah portion.
Yeah, I need to look at that, but I can't wait.
Okay. That's where we're going to be this time next week, dear viewers, and we hope you'll join us then. Have a great week. Ezra, take us on out.
All right, folks. That wraps up our look at Bamidbar-Naso, 2 Torah portions that may seem like ancient census data and priestly manuals, but as we've seen, they're packed with layers of political theology, ritual identity, and evolving priestly power. The wilderness is anything but empty. If you've enjoyed the ride, be sure to like the show, leave us a comment, and and let us know what insights stood out to you, or what you think the Levites were really up to. Thanks for joining us here on Torah Pearls. Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and remember, the wilderness might just be where the real revelations happen. Shalom.